My son-in-law grabbed my wrist in my own living room last Tuesday night and I didn't make a sound. But the next morning I got up before sunrise, brewed a full pot of coffee, and set the dining room table with my late wife's good china. When he came downstairs and saw it, he laughed. "Finally coming around, old man?" he said, dropping into the chair at the head of my table, my chair, like he owned the place. That's when the front door opened. And when he turned around to see who walked in, the color left his face so fast it looked like someone pulled a drain plug. But let me go back. You need to understand who I am before you understand what I did. My name is Clifford Boone. Everyone calls me Cliff. I'm 67 years old, born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. Spent 31 years working quality control at a manufacturing plant just outside of town. The kind of job where you show up early, you stay late, you don't complain. I retired 4 years ago with a pension, a handshake, and a bad left knee from standing on concrete floors my entire working life. My wife Noreen passed 2.5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 7 weeks from diagnosis to gone. 7 weeks. I still haven't figured out what to do with that. We had one daughter, Aubrey. She's 34 now, bright, funny, stubborn in the best way. Got all of that from her mother. She married a man named Wesley about 5 years back. Big wedding, her mother cried through the whole ceremony. I held it together until the father-daughter dance, and then I didn't. Wesley worked in commercial real estate, drove a nice truck, talked a lot. At first I thought he was just confident. Takes time to learn the difference between confidence and contempt. For the first 3 years, things seemed fine. I saw them at holidays, the occasional Sunday dinner. Wesley always had a story, always had an angle, always had a reason why things weren't going the way he planned. The market was soft. His partners were holding him back. The timing was off. There was always something. But Aubrey seemed happy enough and Noreen liked him mostly. So I kept my mouth shut. Then Noreen died. And everything shifted. I don't know if grief broke something in Wesley or if it just gave him permission to stop pretending, but in the months after the funeral, Aubrey started calling me more. Little things at first. Wesley lost his temper over dinner. Wesley said something that didn't sit right. "Wesley thinks I'm spending too much time with you, Dad." I told myself it was stress. Grief does strange things to people. I gave him the benefit of every doubt I had. I ran out of doubt about 14 months ago. Aubrey called me on a Thursday night. I could tell she'd been crying before she picked up the phone. That particular flatness in her voice, the way she breathed through sentences. She told me Wesley had grabbed her arm during an argument, left a bruise. She said it was the first time it got physical, but the way she said first time told me she'd been measuring it for a while. I asked if she needed me to come get her. She said no. She said she just needed me to know. I asked if she'd told anyone else. She hadn't. I asked if she was safe right now. She said yes. He'd gone to sleep. I stayed on the phone with her for 2 hours that night. When she finally hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time staring at the wall. I thought about driving over there. I thought about a lot of things. What I actually did was go to my garage. I've got a workbench out there, same one I've had since 1989. Noreen used to joke that I spent more time with that workbench than with her. She wasn't entirely wrong. I sat out there in the cold with the light on and I thought, I am 67 years old. I am not a big man. Wesley is 40, 6'2", 220. I'm 5'10" on a good day and I haven't been 220 since 1998. If I drove over there and put myself between them, one of two things would happen, and neither of them ended well for Aubrey. I needed to think. I needed to be smart about this. Not fast, smart. The next morning, I called my old friend Dennis Whitaker. We went to high school together. Both served in the army. Him in Germany, me in Korea-era reserve. Long story. And after 30 years, Dennis had retired as a senior detective with Knox County Sheriff's Office. We still had breakfast every few weeks at a diner on Broadway. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always respected about Dennis. When I finished, he set his coffee cup down and said, "Cliff, does Aubrey want to leave?" I said I didn't know. He said that's the first question, because if she doesn't, there's a limit to what the law can do right now. I said I understood that. I said I wasn't calling him about the law yet. I was calling him because I needed to know how to protect my daughter without making things worse. He told me to document everything. Dates, what she told me, photographs of any injuries if she was willing. He told me Tennessee was a one-party consent state for audio recording. He told me to be patient. He told me the goal was to build something solid, not to react. I drove home and I started writing things down. Over the next 3 months, Aubrey told me more. Not everything, I don't think. There are things a daughter doesn't tell her father. But enough. Wesley's temper was getting worse. He'd started drinking more, mostly on weeknights after she'd gone to bed. He'd lost a major listing in December and blamed Aubrey for it somehow. Said she'd distracted him, said she was the reason he couldn't focus. He pushed her against the wall in the hallway. He'd thrown a glass in the kitchen, not at her, but close enough that she felt it in her chest. Every time I got off the phone with her, I went to the garage. I have a small notebook I keep out there, gray cover, the kind they sell at the dollar store. I started writing in it the night she first told me about the bruise. Date, time, what she said, word for word as best I could remember. I kept notes on everything. I'm a quality control man, that's what we do. We document. Aubrey wouldn't leave. I understood it even when it killed me to understand it. She still loved him, or loved who he'd been, or was afraid, or all three at once. She said she was trying to get him into counseling. She said he had good days. She said she wasn't ready. I didn't push. I stayed close. I called every day. I listened. Then came the night 6 weeks ago that changed the shape of things. I was watching the 11 o'clock news when my phone buzzed. Text from Aubrey. Just 3 words. Can you come? I was in my truck in 2 minutes, drove the 11 miles to their house in the dark, hands steady on the wheel, heart not steady at all. The porch light was on. Aubrey opened the door before I reached the steps. She had a cut on her lip, small but split open, and her left eye was already starting to swell. She was holding herself like she was cold, arms crossed, shoulders up. I didn't say anything. I just opened my arms and she stepped into them. Wesley was not home. He'd driven off after it happened. She didn't know where he went and she didn't care. We sat at her kitchen table and she told me what happened. The argument had started over money. He'd found out she'd opened a separate savings account. Just a small one. Money from her own paycheck. He called it a betrayal. Things escalated. He hit her. I looked at my daughter's face and I felt something go very still inside me. Not angry past angry. Steady. I took photographs on my phone. I wrote down everything she told me, time and date, in the notebook I'd brought in from the truck. We talked about options. I asked again if she was ready to leave. This time she didn't say no. She said she was scared. I said that was fair. I said, then let me help you do this right. I called Dennis from her driveway. It was close to midnight. He answered on the second ring. I told him what happened. He said, okay, here's what we do. The next morning, Aubrey went to the Knox County Health Department and had her injuries photographed and documented by a nurse practitioner. The photographs went into a file with a date and a clinical description. Then she called the domestic violence hotline. Dennis had given me that number weeks before and spoke to an advocate named Patricia who walked her through her options and helped her understand the timeline for an order of protection. Wesley came home that night like nothing had happened. That was somehow worse. Over the next 2 weeks, while Wesley watched football and talked about his next deal and acted like a man with no debts anywhere, Aubrey and I were quietly building a case. Dennis walked us through the process. Aubrey wrote a sworn statement. I compiled my notebook entries into a typed document. 3 months of incidents, dates, descriptions, the photographs from both her phone and mine, the medical documentation. Dennis reviewed all of it and connected us with a family law attorney named Patterson, older woman, sharp, no patience for nonsense, who filed for the order of protection and began the divorce proceedings simultaneously. Wesley had no idea. I want to explain something. I'm from a generation where men don't talk about these things. I kept quiet through the whole 3 months while my daughter was being hurt, and I told myself it was strategy, it was patience, it was building the case, and some of that was true. But some of it was shame too. The shame of not being able to protect her. The shame of sitting on that information and not just driving over there and ending it the way a younger version of me might have imagined. I had to let that go. The shame was the enemy, not Wesley. Wesley was just a symptom. The shame is what keeps families silent. What keeps women in houses where they're not safe. What keeps fathers quiet when they should be talking. I talked to my pastor about it. He didn't tell me what to do. He just listened and prayed and said, "Cliff, God doesn't ask you to be your daughter's hero. He asks you to show up." I showed up. The plan came together on a Wednesday. Attorney Patterson called and told me the order of protection had been granted. It would be served the following Saturday morning. She coordinated with Dennis, who coordinated with the Knox County Sheriff's Office, a deputy he trusted named Okafor, organized professional, to have it served at the house. We decided on 9 in the morning. I called Aubrey. I told her what was happening. I told her that Saturday morning she needed to let me come over early. I said I wanted to be there. She said yes. Friday night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed in the house Noreen and I had shared for 29 years and stared at the ceiling. I thought about Aubrey at age 6, refusing to cry when she fell off her bike because she said crying was a waste of time. She did not get that from me. I thought about her at 16 studying at this same kitchen table until midnight because she wanted that scholarship and she got it. I thought about her face when I walked her down the aisle, the way she squeezed my arm right before we stepped through the doors, quick and tight, and didn't say anything, and didn't need to. I thought about Noreen, what she would say if she were here. I think I know. I think she would have handled this faster and better than I did. She always saw people more clearly than I did. She would have seen Wesley for what he was long before I did. "Noreen," I thought in the dark, "I'm sorry it took me this long." Saturday morning, I arrived at their house at 6:30. Aubrey let me in. Wesley was still asleep upstairs. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee and didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. She looked tired, but she looked clear. The swelling around her eye had gone down over the 2 weeks, but the shape of what happened was still there if you knew where to look. Around 7, I asked if she was hungry. She said a little. I said, "Let me make breakfast." I want to be honest about this. I made that breakfast because I needed something to do with my hands. That's the truth. I needed to stand at that stove and do something methodical and useful while we waited for 9 o'clock. But there was something else in it too. Something about making a meal in that kitchen with my daughter at the table. Something about normalcy and presence and not letting him take that from us. I made eggs, bacon, toast, sliced some fruit, set the table properly. Plates, napkins, juice glasses. Aubrey watched me and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "You're going to be okay, you know." I said, "I know, you too." We ate. It was almost 8. At 8:45, we heard the shower start upstairs. Aubrey's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers for a moment. Then I stood up, washed my cup, and went to stand near the front window. At 9:02, Dennis's truck turned onto the street. Right behind it was a Knox County Sheriff's vehicle. They pulled up out front and parked. Dennis got out first. He was in plain clothes, but he carried himself the way he always has, like a man who has seen enough that very little surprises him anymore. He walked to the door and knocked. I was the one who opened it. He looked at me for a moment. Just looked, the way men who've known each other for 50 years can, and then stepped inside. Deputy Okafor came in behind him, uniform pressed, professional, a second deputy just behind. "Morning, Cliff," Dennis said quietly. "Morning. Thank you for coming." "Where is he?" "Upstairs." We stood in the front room. The dining table was still set, plates cleared, but coffee still on. The house smelled like breakfast, like a normal Saturday morning. We heard footsteps on the stairs. Wesley appeared at the bottom of the stairs in jeans and a t-shirt, hair damp, looking at his phone. He walked toward the kitchen without looking up. Then some awareness of the room made him stop. He looked up, saw the deputies, saw Dennis, looked at me, then he looked at Aubrey, standing in the kitchen doorway. His face did several things in a very short time. Confusion, calculation, then something that I can only call the particular panic of a man whose carefully maintained version of reality has just collapsed. "What?" He looked at Aubrey. "What is this? What did you do?" Aubrey didn't answer. She stood very still. Dennis stepped forward. Wesley Alderton, he used his full name the way people in authority learn to do, measured, no room for ambiguity. Wesley turned to him. "Yeah, who are you?" "Dennis Whitaker. I'm a retired Knox County detective. Here as a courtesy. This is Deputy Okafor." He gestured. "He has something to serve you." Deputy Okafor stepped forward with the paperwork. "Calm, by the book, no drama. Mr. Alderton, you're being served with an order of protection. Please take a moment to read the first page. It outlines the conditions." Wesley's jaw tightened. He didn't take the papers at first. His eyes went back to Aubrey. "You had me served? In my own house?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Her house. Her name is on the deed, Wesley. Always was." He looked at me then. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time since I'd known him. I'd always been background to him. The father-in-law. The old man with the garage and the pension and the quiet opinions he didn't ask for. He had never once taken me seriously. He opened his mouth. Dennis said, "I'd think very carefully right now." Wesley closed his mouth. He took the papers. His hands weren't steady. He read the first page, or pretended to. The order required him to vacate the property within 4 hours. No contact with Aubrey. 500 feet. "This is insane," he said, but his voice had gone small. "I haven't done anything, Aubrey." "I have photographs," Aubrey said. Her voice was steady. "I have medical documentation. I have a sworn statement. My father has a 3-month log of every incident I told him about. We have all of it." Wesley looked at me. I said, "I told you when you married her that she was the best thing I'd ever done. I meant that, which is why I've spent the last 3 months making sure this was done right." I paused. "You should pack what you need for a few days. You have 4 hours. Something moved across his face. I've tried to name it since. It wasn't remorse. I don't think Wesley Alderton has remorse the way most people do. It was closer to the look of a man who has just realized the game he thought he was winning was a different game entirely, and he'd already lost. He didn't say another word to me. He went upstairs. Deputy Okafor followed to the bottom of the stairs and waited. 35 minutes later, Wesley came down with 2 bags, walked through the front door, and didn't look back. The door closed. Aubrey stood very still for a moment. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands, not crying, just breathing. I sat down next to her. Dennis and the deputies stepped out onto the porch to give us a moment. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. I just sat there. After a while, she lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. She looked at the kitchen. at the plate still in the drying rack, at the ordinary morning light coming through the window. "I should have done this sooner," she said. "You did it when you were ready," I said. "I was scared." "I know." She looked at me. "Were you?" I thought about it honestly. Every day, but scared doesn't mean you don't move. It just means you move careful. The divorce took 8 months. Wesley hired an attorney who tried to contest the order of protection, tried to frame the marriage as mutually difficult, tried a few other angles. Attorney Patterson handled all of it without blinking. The documentation held, the medical records held. The order was made permanent. Wesley got nothing from the house. Aubrey had purchased it before they married, and the title had never changed. He'd contributed to some renovations and received a modest settlement for that, which felt generous to me. But Patterson said it was cleaner. He moved to Nashville. I don't know what he's doing there, and I don't think about it much. Aubrey sold the house 6 months after the divorce. She said she didn't want to live where those memories were. She bought a small place about 3 miles from me. Her choice. She brought it up first, and I helped her move in on a Saturday in October. We built her new bookshelves together in her living room, just the two of us, the way Noreen and I used to build things, before my knees went. She cried once during the move, just once, briefly, when she was unpacking a box and found a photograph of her and Wesley from their first year together. She looked at it for a moment, then set it face down. I didn't ask about it. I still go to my garage most evenings, still sit at that workbench. I've started working on a jewelry box. Took me a while to land on the right project, but I wanted something small and precise, something that requires patience. I've got the joinery almost done. There's a gray notebook on the shelf above the workbench. I haven't thrown it away. I'm not sure I will. People ask me sometimes, friends from church, guys from the plant who've heard pieces of the story, how I stayed quiet for so long, how I sat on all of that and didn't just go over there. I tell them the truth. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. There is something very primal in a father when his child is being hurt, something that doesn't care about strategy or courtrooms or what's admissible. I had to choose every single day for 3 months between what I wanted to do and what would actually help her. I chose her. That's all. I chose what was best for her over what felt right for me. Noreen would have understood that. She understood most things before I did. If you're in a situation like this, or you know someone who is, I want to say something clearly. Documentation is not weakness. Patience is not cowardice. Getting the right people involved, building the case, doing it properly so it actually holds, that's not giving up. That's fighting smart. And if you are the one in the house being hurt, I want you to hear this from a father. You are not the problem. You never were. And the person who loves you will wait as long as it takes for you to be ready. They will write things down. They will answer the phone at midnight. They will make breakfast while you're waiting for 9 o'clock. Aubrey came over for dinner last Sunday. She brought a pie she made herself, blackberry, her mother's recipe, the one she finally asked me to write down after Noreen passed. We sat at the kitchen table and ate too much of it, and she told me about a woman at her job who reminds her of herself 18 months ago, and she asked me what she should do. I said, stay close, answer the phone, listen. She nodded. She already knew. She got that from her mother. I keep thinking about the moment Wesley's face changed. Not when the deputies walked in. Before that, the half second when he looked at that breakfast table and thought he'd won. That smirk. That easy confidence of a man who had never once been held accountable for anything. That's the image I come back to, because it tells me something true about how cruelty sustains itself. It survives on silence. It feeds on the assumption that no one is watching, no one is writing anything down, no one is building anything in the background while it does its damage. I was watching, I was writing it down, And I have thought a lot about why it took me as long as it did to act, and I think I finally understand it. I was waiting to feel brave. I thought courage was something that arrived before the action, that one morning I'd wake up unafraid and then I'd know it was time. That's not how it works. I was scared every single day for 3 months. I wrote in that notebook, scared. I called Dennis, scared. I sat at Aubrey's kitchen table the morning of the service, with my hands wrapped around a coffee cup and my heart going too fast. The fear never left. I just stopped letting it be the deciding vote. That's the only thing I'd call wisdom in any of this. Not the documentation, not the legal strategy, not knowing the right people. Those things mattered, but they're tools. The wisdom was understanding that patience in service of the right outcome is not weakness. It looks like weakness from the outside. It feels like weakness from the inside. But there is a difference between waiting because you're afraid and waiting because you're building something that will actually hold. I knew the difference by then. Barely, but I knew it. What I did right, I did because Aubrey needed it to be right, not dramatic, not satisfying to me in some immediate way, right. And that required me to set aside what I wanted, which was to be her father in the most primal sense of that word, and instead be useful. To think clearly when thinking clearly was the hardest possible thing. To keep my character intact when what I felt like doing had nothing to do with character. Noreen used to say that how you treat people when it costs you something is the only measurement that matters. Wesley treated my daughter like she was something he owned, and he did it most freely when he thought no one was keeping score. I kept score, not out of vengeance. I want to be honest about that, but because someone had to hold the record of what was true, because the truth, properly documented, is the only thing that survives a courtroom. Aubrey is the one who did the hard work. She made the call when she was ready. She wrote the statement. She sat across from Attorney Patterson and described things no daughter should have to describe to a stranger. She did all of that while still going to work every morning, still functioning, still holding herself together in ways I didn't fully see until it was over and I could look back at the whole shape of it. She has a kind of endurance in her that I recognize because I watched her mother carry things quietly for 30 years and never once put them down until she had to. I think about what I would tell a father in the position I was in 18 months ago. I'd say, stay close, answer the phone, write things down, and understand that protecting someone sometimes means doing the slow, unglamorous, careful work instead of the thing that would make you feel like a father in the movies. The notebooks, the timestamps, the coordination with Dennis, the 4-hour wait on a Saturday morning, none of that looks like strength from the outside. But it held. It held in court. It held in the order of protection, and it held for Aubrey in the way that actually mattered. She's okay. We're okay. That's the whole story.